Back better than ever. It's the Sixers Talk podcast presented to you by Will Works. I'm Ben Berry. I'm joined by the one, the only, the great Noah Levick. How you doing today, Noah?
Hey Ben, doing pretty well, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. No Danny Palmels. He's out kayaking or at the Olympics or something at vacation because he doesn't work hard. We're going to get into Sixers signing Andre Drummond, summer league action, Danny Green. We got a bunch of stuff going on here in the Sixers Talk podcast. A lot of Sixers information. Before we get into it, I want you to rate and review. Give Noah 5 stars because he's a 5-star person, 5 out of 5. Don't rate it based on me because I'm a 1 out of 5. But Noah, the Sixers brought back the veteran Danny Green on a 2-year, $20 million deal. Second year as a team option. What are your thoughts?
I think it was a really big move. I think it was a lingering question in free agency. I mean, we had reached a point where Green was one of the best free agents out there, period. And the fact that he's sticking with the Sixers at what I think is a reasonable price, I think is good news for the team. Daryl Morey tweeted this out at 1 a.m. and it appeared many fans were not thrilled about it. But the fact of the matter is the starting lineup that included Green had about a plus 16 net rating during the regular season. They were a truly elite lineup. I think a lot of the ire toward Morey was the fact that Ben Simmons was the starting point guard on that lineup, and Ben Simmons is still on this basketball team. But look, I think if you judge Danny Green's last season and the contributions he brought to the table, there's no debating that he's an extremely valuable player. Shot a career high volume on threes, over 6 per game, made over 40% of them, led the league with 90 corner threes. And though he's diminished a bit defensively and didn't look good early in that Hawks series against Trae Young, I think it's still very important, especially in the event of a Ben Simmons trade, that he's an above average perimeter defender who gets a lot of steals and creates transition offense through those steals. So I think this was very positive news for the Sixers, even if the major splash this offseason has not yet occurred and is still looming over everything in terms of Ben Simmons. If you look at Danny Green returning to this team in isolation for 2 years, $20 million, I think it's very good for this team.
I like the move. We discussed it last week. I think his veteran presence and voice is needed in the locker room. He's been to the NBA Finals 4 times. He's needed. He's been to the finals a handful of times, put it that way. He's needed. Even if he's not what Ben Simmons or Matisse Thybulle is defensively, he has the IQ. He knows where he needs to be. Yes, he slipped. He's not the defender he was with the Raptors or where he was in San Antonio, but he gets the job done. So, and people are upset because they say he was exposed against Trae Young. Trae Young's a good player. There's not many players in the league that's going to slow him down. Unfortunately, Danny Green's one of those players that's not going to slow him down. Danny Green should have been on Trae Young, in my opinion, to start the series anyway. If Ben gets moved, you definitely need him on the court. Just continentally, I just butchered that word, yes. But the Sixers need Danny Green. So I'm a fan of the move. I'm interested to see what else happens, and if fans are upset about Daryl Morey tweeting that out, the Sixers starting lineup. I think people have to be thankful for what they have while still pursuing something more. You can do both. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom or championship or nothing. You can appreciate what you have while still wanting more. And I think Danny Green is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make about that Trae Young matchup. It's something that actually comes to mind as I remember late in the season, after a regular season game, I asked Green, like, does he have a preference of guarding a star versus maybe guarding a non-star player and having a little more freedom to hunt for steals? And I think he's still proud and basically still indicated that he enjoys that assignment of going against star players. But I think at this point in his career, the reality is oftentimes he's best suited for guarding the other team's second or third best perimeter player. And there's no shame in having a player who does that at a pretty high level. And also, as you say, has a high defensive IQ and well above average instincts in terms of how to create steals and get extra possessions for his team. So I think he does a lot of little things that help the Sixers. The locker room intangibles are worth noting here too, especially in the context of George Hill was waived and Dwight Howard is going to be moving to Los Angeles. So this is a team that Doc Rivers felt was young last year, and now they've gotten a little bit younger. And they bring back a 34-year-old in Green who's won a lot of playoff games, won 3 NBA titles. And look, the reality also is the Sixers, of course, it's painful to relive, but perhaps would have won that Hawks series if Danny Green was healthy and Furkan Korkmaz wasn't in that starting lineup for the final 4 games after Green hurt his right calf. So by no means saying Danny Green is a perfect or immensely, great basketball player, but he's still quite good even at 34 years old. And I think it's very big that the Sixers got this done. I think there would have been a lot more questions about this team if Danny Green decided to sign elsewhere. I know we've talked about it in previous podcasts. You're probably looking at a situation there where Matisse Thybulle is a starter, and though he is brilliant defensively, I think there would be a lot of questions heading into the season if Thybulle was your starting small forward about whether he could bring enough to the Sixers as an offensive player and three-point shooter. So Sixers don't have to worry about that now. They've got a dependable guy in Green. And I think it's absolutely a pretty big move that he's coming back to Philly.
Yeah, just having that veteran leadership telling, hey, Joel, get down there, bingo over there, that's much needed. When he went out in the Hawks season series, it showed it was missing, like beyond him just not being there, Furkan offense or Matisse defense, like having someone tell other players where to go, because yes, Joel and Ben anchored the defense. It'd be lying if I said that Tobias or Seth Curry were outstanding defenders. So Ben and Joel can do what they do, but having that other guy to point them and tell them where to go is clutch. His contract, are you surprised that he did not get a little more? 2 years, $20 million. I thought he probably could have got 2 years, 30 somewhere out in the open market. I thought it was going to be a deal closer to that.
I did think it would be a little bit more. It's interesting because this is according to Rich Hoffman of The Athletic, had a good story just breaking this down. Right now, the Sixers are about $1 million under the luxury tax aprons. You wonder if that was a factor here in these negotiations. Obviously, a lot of this cap situation is a bit convoluted and tends to fluctuate a lot. And the Sixers are not hard capped currently. But if they were to get in a scenario where there's a sign and trade on the table or what have you, it is nice that at least for the time being they're under that hard cap. So I wonder if that was a factor in these negotiations. But yeah, just at face value, 2 years, $20 million. I agree. That's pretty good price from the team side. And perhaps part of that is teams around the league just being a little reluctant to give a player who's 34 years old and has a lot of miles on his body more. But I think regardless of what it went into it, yeah, the Sixers should feel good that he's back, number one. And as was the case with Furkan Korkmaz, I think the price is eminently reasonable.
So, well, that's Danny Green. We're going to hit this quick commercial break and coming back, talk about a old foe becoming teammates.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilmU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
No, what is going on? That was Joel Embiid's tweet after they signed his former rival who downplayed it in his press conference, Andre Drummond. He has led the league in rebounds 4 years. He is a good player. Like, it's just unfortunate that the league and how we play basketball all changed, like, right in his prime. Stan Van Gundy took that Detroit job because he thought that Drummond was going to be the next great big man. Then before we knew it, we blinked, and shooting threes and was the shot to take. And he's just kind of floundered around. But he's filling a void left by Dwight Howard. He's the Sixers' backup center. What do you make of that move?
It was a surprise. I understand the what is going on sort of reaction. I think it was a bit of a shocker in large part because there are just many obvious similarities with Dwight Howard in that he is an absolutely elite rebounder, physically imposing player, subpar free throw shooter, and much more of that traditional old school big man than the type of player you'd associate with Morey era basketball, who takes threes and plays this more analytically efficient sort of game. So look, they got him for the vet minimum 1 year. And like with Dwight Howard, it has a chance to be a real bargain. But like with Dwight Howard, I think it's completely fair if you're skeptical about whether Drummond is viable to play however much is necessary in the postseason as like a sole backup to Joel Embiid. The free throws could be a problem. The turnovers could be a problem. The lack of spacing could be a problem. I think all of those are valid concerns, but overall, I think the pros tend to outweigh the cons, especially given we're talking about a vet minimum deal. And this is a player who, outside of his rookie season, has been a full-time NBA starter. So there's no reason to be worried at all if Joel Embiid goes down with an injury. This is someone who can step into the starting lineup, no problem, and give you 30, 35 good minutes a night. He's been very durable as well throughout his career. So it's a real fascinating move. And I'm really curious how it's all going to play out. But I think ultimately the question is, how much of an upgrade is he over Dwight Howard? The Sixers would hope it's substantial enough that it's worth going with him as the backup center, and that his weaknesses are not going to cost them in playoff games.
The move definitely, can't say mind-boggling, but then it made me think just why necessarily. I understand he's a good player. I believe he's still a starting caliber NBA center. Good player, just playing in a wrong era. Why I questioned it was because with Dwight Howard, the spacing, as you mentioned earlier, was the Dwight Howard, Ben Simmons lineups were just bad. No other way around it. Drummond, who might be more lacking on the offensive end, and who is a worse free throw shooter, and pairing him with Ben Simmons, I just did not see that if the Sixers are going to keep Ben Simmons. So I guess maybe the signing just made me think like maybe Ben Simmons is actually going to move, and we can get into that later, or you can listen to a previous pod. That's what my immediate thought was. How would that work out? I think Drummond can defend the rim. He will grab rebounds. I think he's a solid player. I just wasn't sure how that spacing would work out if the team kept Ben Simmons.
Yeah, no, that's totally makes sense as a reaction. As we've noted a bunch of times, like the Simmons Howard lineups were outscored by double figures per 100 possessions, and it was apparent to anyone who watched more than a few minutes of them together by the end of the year that it just wasn't viable in the playoffs. So we've known for quite a long time that a Ben Simmons trade is a very real possibility. And if you're looking for further evidence that the Sixers are open to that, here is a little bit more. So I agree with you on that front. I think probably the bottom line here is just the Sixers see Drummond, who is turning 28 next month, as a better player right now than Howard, who is 35 years old. What both of those guys were at their peak isn't really relevant. Obviously, it's just like what they are right now. And Drummond shares a lot of the strengths, and then maybe he's able to provide you a little more defensively as a guy that's consistently, at least among big men, among the league leaders in steals. So get some steals, create some transition possessions, and brings a little bit to the table on that front. But yeah, it's not what anyone was expecting the Sixers would go to as their backup in free agency, especially after the comment by Daryl Morey that any big man we add has to be switchable and able to shoot. And those are not qualities you would associate with Andre Drummond. But at least for now, he's the only backup behind Embiid. Charles Bassey is expected to be a part of the team, but the second round pick hasn't signed yet. So for the time being, a lot is on Andre Drummond's plate, and we'll see how he handles it.
So you dialed into the presser with Drummond that was earlier today, and the Sixers they put out a tweet of Joel Embiid and Andre Drummond dapping each other up. We saw a lot of old tweets and media stuff about the two's heated beef. Drummond played that down in the presser. Are you buying it?
I think I'm mostly buying it. I mean, maybe we might hear something a little different behind closed doors. He says just trash talk is a part of basketball, and it's something he does with everyone. And I think that is a good and true point, but everyone saw that with Joel Embiid, this escalated beyond the typical trash talk. These guys were getting very personal on social media and going out of their way to demean the other in their post-game sessions with the media. So I think it's probably not accurate to brush that off as totally irrelevant, but is it something that I would expect is a major obstacle in their ability to be teammates? Not at all. These guys are 27, 28 years old. They've been doing this for a while. They're most interested in winning, and I'd be really surprised if that is at all a problem. But no doubt that history, as much as Drummond wants to say there was no real beef, is very much significant and is something that a lot of folks were, immediately came to their mind when they signed Andre Drummond. I mean, Joel Embiid was talking about how he owns real estate in his head. And I remember after a game where he had like 30 plus in the first half against Drummond and Zaza Pachulia, he said he owned both of them. And clearly there has been some animosity there, but now that they're teammates, I wouldn't expect any problems to exist.
I would agree with you. Now that they're teammates, I think whether it's smooth over or not, I think they'll just bite their tongue and do the best to make things work well going forward. Drummond saying that it was just trash talk. I will quote the great philosopher Jay-Z. We don't believe you. You need more people. So before we move on, the Sixers, Danny Green, Drummond, and a bunch of teams in the East are making moves. Whether it is the Knicks picking up reports they picked up Kemba Walker, the Wizards have Spencer Dinwiddie now, the Bulls have done a lot, DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball. I'm not saying any of those teams are better than the Sixers. I don't think that at all. And we also don't know what's going to happen with Ben Simmons. He's coming back. Will he be gone? Do you think it'll be a mistake for analysts, commentators, and fans just to assume the Sixers are the clear-cut, like, one or two best teams in the East going into next season with all the moves we've seen?
I think that would probably be a little too strong. I think a lot of things had to break their way, quite frankly, for them to end up with the number one seed in the East. That's not to detract from the accomplishment, but we all saw the Nets had just a plethora of unfortunate injuries, and the Bucks did a lot of experimentation during the regular season, and it ultimately paid off for them. With the NBA title. So no, I wouldn't at the moment consider the Sixers the favorites in the East by any stretch. I think they're still in the top tier roughly with the Bucks and the Nets. But as you noted, a lot of teams seemingly have improved in the East, and there will be a lot of contenders for playoff spots and home court advantage and things of that nature. And of course, the Miami Heat look like they're one of those teams that have gotten better through the addition of Kyle Lowry, bring back Duncan Robinson long term, PJ Tucker, Dwayne Dedman, etc. That looks like a formidable squad as well. So I think the East is shaping up to be very competitive. I don't think the Sixers have gotten worse or anything like that, but the team hasn't made any major upgrades. We're all waiting to see what happens with Ben Simmons. And meanwhile, a lot of other Eastern Conference teams have gotten better. Some of the contenders have improved. And then some teams, such as perhaps the Wizards, have taken a little step up and will be better competition for the Sixers next season, one would think.
Said a lot, and I would agree with you. And I'm just excited for NBA basketball to come back. It hasn't even been a month without it, and I'm already looking forward to it. But there's no NBA games, but we do have Summer League, and we'll talk more about that when we come back.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
Noah, Summer League basketball is here. How excited are you to watch some Summer League games?
I'm excited. Yeah, it looks like the Sixers have an exciting, dynamic team, and it's always nice when the draft picks, the past couple of years play. All 6 guys that the Sixers have taken in the last 2 NBA drafts will be participating, which is great for us to get a glimpse at these players. And it's also really nice for players such as Tyrese Maxey and Isaiah Joe, who didn't have this opportunity to participate in Summer League last year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So should be a lot of fun. I think just being realistic with our expectations, there tends to be some sloppiness. There tends to be some wild basketball that takes place, but some of that chaos also adds to the enjoyment factor, I think. These are not polished rotation NBA players. These are oftentimes young players looking to develop, hoping to add new skills to their game and expand their repertoire, and that should be fun to see.
No, it's a lot of fun to see. As you mentioned, there was no Summer League games last year because of the pandemic, so I did not get to see the guy that became a fan favorite here in the city, Tyrese Maxey, until the season started. I want him to get all the reps possible because whether he becomes a star or not, I don't know. I think he will at least be a solid contributor for the next decade around the league. I think the kid can play. I think it's enjoyable watching him play. Get to see more Isaiah Joe, get to see the rookies for this year, and just get to see some of the other draft picks teams have picked over the last 2 years play in a more in-depth setting when it's just them. They can't rely on vets. It's them to figure out different situations, make key buckets, make the right rotations on defense, make big plays. So I am a fan of Summer League, just watching with minimal rooting interest and just watching people who will possibly be a star or at least a key role player down the road.
Definitely. You don't want to read too much into it, but often you can learn some valuable info. And I remember the year Furkan Korkmaz scored 40 points in Summer League. And no, he's not a 40-point player in the NBA, but maybe that did tell us a little bit about, okay, this guy has that ability to just catch fire and put together some special performances on occasion. So definitely a lot to look forward to there. I will say, though, I understand wanting to see the most out of Maxey. Sixers have some other intriguing point guards on this roster as well. Frank Mason III, who was the 2019-20 G League MVP, was going to play for the Bluecoats in the bubble and then actually got signed to a two-way by the Magic. And then Dacian Nix, who I was mildly surprised wasn't drafted from G League Ignite. This big point guard prospect, I think he's about 6'5", but just has some really special skills and instincts as a passer. And I wouldn't be surprised if he contributes a few highlight dimes for the Sixers in summer league. So the 6 draft picks, I think, are the ones we'll be monitoring the closest, but there are some other interesting players on this roster as well. It'll be up to Brian Adams, who's a Sixers assistant and will be the head summer league coach, to divvy up those minutes, but I'm sure we'll get glimpses at all of these players in summer league, and that will include also the two ways that the Sixers have, at least for the time being. Rajon Tucker, who, if you've ever watched the Sixers layup lines, you know he flies ridiculously high as this incredible highlight dunker, even at 6'3". And then Aaron Henry, the undrafted wing, out of Michigan State, hard-nosed, kind of defensive-minded player. So a lot of names to watch, and yeah, it should be an enjoyable deal. And Sixers, I believe, are guaranteed at least 5 games. I think they got four games on the schedule, and then the NBA set things up so each team will play 5. So yeah, lot to look forward to on that front.
Let's go. You heard it there from Noah Levick first. He's the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to all things Sixers. So you want any good Sixers information? Go follow Noah Levick on Twitter. Noah, what are you working on over at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com?
Yeah, far too kind. I appreciate the endorsement. Working on right now, just a story after that Drummond press conference, touching on a little of what we talked about here, some of the parallels with Dwight Howard and what exactly Sixers fans can expect Drummond to bring in terms of the similarities with Howard and some of the ways he might be different as well. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
Nice. You know what I'm working on? To prove to all the listeners I'm not an idiot. Continuity. Boom. Butchered it in the first segment. Just got it there. A lot of people probably stop listening and probably think, oh, this guy Ben Berry is an idiot. You might be right, but you know what? Me and Noah's still getting paychecks. That's what matters. This is the Sixers Talk podcast presented to you by William University. For Noah Levick, Danny Palmel, who's still somewhere drinking a pina colada in the middle of nowhere, not doing any real work, I'm Ben Berry. We'll catch you next time.